Back in October 2024, I had the chance to check out the Fujifilm XM5 when it first came out, and that was actually what kickstarted my whole journey into using more Fujifilm cameras. Since then, this has been my go-to recommendation for the best entry-level camera to get if you're just starting to get into photography, and while there were some downsides to it, this was still my go-to recommendation. But now we have a new contender for that spot, which is this guy, the Fujifilm XT30 Mark III. Is this my newest recommendation for the camera to get if you're just starting to get into photography, and did this fix a lot of the issues that the XM5 had? Today, we're gonna find out. Now if you're looking for your first camera, your first question might be, why get Fujifilm cameras at all? And I think the biggest part is the film simulations. Obviously, Fujifilm has been developing film for a long time, and they now have made digital film simulations, which actually look really good, but it goes a lot more into just how the photos turn out. I think one of the biggest bottlenecks for beginners is editing. You either don't really know how to edit, or you don't really want to spend the time to learn how to edit, or even if you are learning, you still want to be able to get really good photos while you're experimenting. And I know personally from experience, I've had a bunch of friends who are really into photography, but then they stopped shooting because they didn't really want to edit the photos after, and that ended them kind of straying away from photography in general. With Fujifilm, you get the film simulations, and that actually gives you the best of both because you're able to shoot both RAW and JPEG. So the JPEGs look great straight out of camera, you're able to post them on Instagram, print them out, share them with family members, whatever you want. But the RAW files, if you do want to edit your photos, you can just edit those and just have fun with them. But if you are someone who really doesn't want to edit photos, just using the JPEG straight out of camera look great, and they do look better than what something like Sony or Canon or Nikon will offer. Now let's really quickly talk about the similarities of both of these cameras. So both of these cameras share the same 26.1 megapixel sensor. This is an APS-C sensor. You're going to get enough resolution for social media or printing, sharing with family members or friends, pretty much everything that you're probably going to want to do with these cameras. This also means that for video, you have the exact same specs. So both of these cameras can shoot 6.2K open gate. Both have the newest X processor 5, which means you're getting the newest AI subject detection, you're getting the same autofocus speed. So if you're trying to look at these cameras and decide on one based on image quality and performance, they're going to be exactly the same. Both of these cameras have film simulation dials on the top, they both use the same battery, they both use a single card slot, and they both have touchscreens. They both do not have IBIS or in-body image stabilization. So overall, these are pretty much going to be the same camera. The only difference is going to be some features that one might have that the other doesn't, a little bit of the body design, and it's basically just going to come down to personal preference. So onto the differences. One of the biggest things that the XM5 did not have that the XT30 does is a viewfinder, an electronic viewfinder. So with this, if it's super bright outside, you're able to look inside the camera and be able to get a very nice view of what your camera sees without the sun blocking. Or if you just like to use a viewfinder and not use a screen, then you have that here. If you look back at my vlog when I first checked out the XM5, I did this kind of like ghost viewfinder thing where I would try to use the camera and I would bring it up to my eye, just to remember that it doesn't have a viewfinder. And even when I come back to this camera months later, I still instinctively try to put it up to my eye, then to realize it doesn't have a viewfinder. For some people, it doesn't really matter too much if you're used to shooting with the screen. For me, as someone who started out in photography and always had a camera with a viewfinder, I really do like having a viewfinder. Now for the body design, the ergonomics, the XM5 does have the classic flip out vlog style screen. So obviously this is really useful if you just want to hold it out and be able to shoot yourself. Because of the flip out screen, you're able to see yourself. It's also super useful if you want to do portrait orientation. If you're shooting portraits, you can hold it vertically and be able to flip out the screen that way. You can obviously still flip out the screen if you want to get low shots or hold it up super high and get really high shots. So that's the advantage of this. The XT30 does not have a flip out screen. It has a tilt out screen. So it just tilts up or it tilts down. So I actually like this for photography more because it just kind of keeps everything close to the body instead of flipping out. So if I want to get low shots, just tilt it up. If I want to get high shots, I can just tilt it down. Obviously, you are going to be at a disadvantage if you want to shoot portrait or vertical orientation because it doesn't flip up, and you won't be able to see yourself if you want to do any vlogging. So like I mentioned, this is just preference. I like to do more photos with these Fujifilm cameras, so I prefer a tilt up screen, but some people might prefer the vlog style screens. Now both of these cameras have Q buttons, which is for their quick menu. It's just a very easy way to access some settings that you might want to change frequently. On the XT30, it's right here by your thumb where your hand would be, so it's very easy to just quickly access if you want to. On the XM5, it's actually right here on top of the plate. It is a little bit more difficult to reach, but definitely not a deal breaker. They both have Q buttons for the quick menu. Now one thing that the XT30 has is also an FN button, or a function button. This is basically just a button that you can customize to whatever you want. On the XM5, you actually don't have a function button because that's replaced by a record button for video. So you do have one more programmable button on the XT30. There's also an AEL or auto exposure lock, and AFL button, autofocus lock. You have two separate buttons for those on the XT30 Mark III, and for those you can also program each one to individual functions. On the XM5, they actually combine the auto exposure lock and autofocus lock button into one button. So that button you still can customize, but the XT30 Mark III would have one extra button to assign to whatever you want. So basically, the XT30 Mark III has a few more customizable buttons if you want to take advantage of it. Now let's move on to the button layout of the cameras. So on the XM5, you have this top dial right up here, and you also have a front dial right by your index finger on your right hand. So how I have this set up is that for the XM5, you can use the top dial up here to control your shutter speed, and then on the front, you can use it to turn and control your aperture. If you click into the front button, it actually switches modes and goes into ISO. So then if I click into it, I can then control ISO. I don't personally really like this. I really like having dedicated dials for each of the exposure triangle. So I don't really like having to control aperture and ISO with the same dial. Sometimes I do misclick it and I think I'm changing aperture, but I'm actually changing ISO and vice versa. So that is a little bit annoying. With the XT30 Mark III, it actually changes it up. So you have a back dial right up here, and you can also click into it for another function. You have a front dial, same as the XM5, right by your index finger. You can also click into that to change something. And you also have a dedicated shutter speed dial right up here. So with this top dial, you can actually turn it and control your shutter speed. You also have A on the top, so you can set that to auto, but you have a dedicated dial right up here to change your shutter speed, which means that for the back dial, I can actually change this to ISO, and then for the front dial, keep this on aperture, which means I now have 3 dials for each of the exposure triangles, and it's like what I mentioned, I like having a separate control for each of them. That's actually really nice to see on these cameras because for a lot of like entry level and smaller body size cameras, there's usually very limited dials because they're trying to save space. So it's very nice to be able to have 3 separate dials for each of those controls. Now for the body style, I do have a cage on this, which adds a little bit of extra grip on the XM5. And I do think that that's necessary because it is a really small body. If I take off the grip, there's barely any indent on the front, and my hand actually starts to cramp a little bit if I'm holding onto the XM5 for too long. For the XT30 Mark III, it definitely is bigger than the XM5 as you can see. Now you do have a slightly more pronounced grip than the XM5. I wouldn't say that it's a lot more, but it definitely is a little bit more. Now it is still pretty small, my pinky finger still does hang off the bottom. In terms of ergonomics, I wouldn't say that one really wins over the other. XT30, again, just a tiny bit more comfortable, but I still wouldn't say these cameras are comfortable to hold. For these smaller style bodies, you definitely are prioritizing more compactness and size rather than the ergonomics of it. Now in terms of film simulations, you both have film simulation dials on the top to control those film recipes I mentioned earlier. Now on the XM5, you have 8 film simulations to choose from and then 4 custom ones, FS1, 2, and 3, which stands for Film Simulation 1, 2, and 3, and Custom. And overall, you have 20 different film simulations that you can control between, and you can basically just control them all from this dial up here. On the XT30 Mark III, you have 6 film simulations at the top, and then 4 custom ones, FS1 to 3 again, and C for custom, and you basically have the same 20 film simulations to control. You just have to switch between them in the menus sometimes, because you only have these 6 dedicated on top. So you have film simulations. Film simulations is the ones that Fujifilm makes. So this is like Classic Chrome, Classic Negative, Provia. These are the ones that Fujifilm makes that are like a base. These are the ones that Fujifilm makes. Then you have film recipes, which basically uses your film simulations as a base. So it'll use Classic Chrome as a base, and then you're able to tweak things like grain, chroma effects, highlights, shadows. Basically on the XM5, you have FS1 to 3 film simulations. When you program these only program film simulations. So you can only put a different film simulation on these buttons. if you want to change your film recipe, you actually have to go to the secondary dial on the body, and you have C1 to C4, which is custom 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those are where your film recipes will live. On the XT30 Mark III, FS1 to 3, film simulation 1 to 3, you can actually program your film recipes onto it. So I can program each of these to a different film recipe. Now I know that's a little bit confusing. I don't know why Fujifilm does that. It's just something to know if you are getting one of these cameras and you're trying to program your film recipes and you're not sure why it's not working. You might have to check out which camera it is and if you're putting it in the right spot to change the film recipes. Now on the XM5, if you want to change between things like manual mode to, let's say, aperture priority mode, manual mode, obviously everything will be manual. If you want to change it to aperture priority, you can just switch the dial at the top to aperture priority. On the XT30 Mark III, because you don't have that main dial, the way you put it into aperture priority is changing the shutter speed to auto, and then changing the ISO to auto, and then controlling the aperture yourself. So you're basically manually putting it into aperture priority mode instead of just switching the mode like on the XM5. Now you might notice on the top that the XT30 Mark III also has a switch right up here, right next to the shutter speed. It says auto, and that actually just quickly flicks your whole camera into auto mode. This is really great if you're someone who's just starting out with photography and you want to use auto for a little bit until you get more comfortable with learning the controls. You have a dedicated dial up here. This is also really useful if you are experienced with photography, but you just want to hand the camera off to someone who doesn't really know. Maybe you want to hand it off to a family member or a friend. You can just quickly switch it to auto so that they can literally pick up the camera and start shooting. And then when you get it back, flick it back into manual mode. With the XM5, it doesn't have any kind of dial like that, so that's actually really convenient for the XT30. On the other side of the top plate near the film simulations, you actually have another switch, and as you can see right here, if I flick it, you have a little flash. So you close it by just pushing it down, you can flick it and it comes back up. And it obviously is what that is. If you click it, you have a little flash. This is actually really cool and actually something that I didn't really think I would need. If you see my recent Japan stuff, I've actually been shooting a lot of film. So I had a film camera. This has a pop-up flash, which is really useful. It's just been really useful for low light situations. That's actually why I picked up an Fujifilm X106 again, because it has a built-in flash. I'll talk more about that later in a different video if you are following my recent trend of switching between a bunch of cameras. But yes, I did pick up the Fujifilm X106 again. But yeah, it's just super useful for the XT30 Mark III. Maybe you are just using a kit lens which doesn't have the best level of performance, or maybe you just want that kind of retro flash vibe look. You have the built-in flash here that the XM5 doesn't have. The XM5, you would have to add on an additional flash. That just is something extra to carry. Now on the XM5, you have a couple video modes that the XT30 Mark III doesn't. So you have a vlog mode, which basically just helps reframe you. It basically just makes it really easy to vlog. You also have a couple options in the video mode, like product priority, where it focuses on a product that you're holding in front of the camera instead of a person's face, or you can kind of blur out the background digitally. I haven't really used these modes too much, so I'm not going to talk too much about it, but there are some features there that you can look into if you want that the XT30 doesn't have. You also have a different microphone system in the XM5. So if you are trying to do some kind of vlogging, you just want to record some audio, the XM5 can actually control 3 different mics. So you can set it so that the mics only pick up the audio from the back of the camera. You can set it so that it only picks up audio from the front of the camera, or you can set it so that it picks up the audio from everywhere, all around the camera. For the XT30 Mark III, you basically just have a standard stereo mic. It basically always just records everything, so you're not able to isolate some sounds. Obviously, if you are trying to vlog with the XM5, I would at some point recommend getting a dedicated external mic, some kind of lav or shotgun mic. You are going to get the best audio out of that. But if you are in a pinch and you just want to get started for really cheap with just the camera, you do have those options to control where the mic is picking up audio from. Now let's go on to the price. I'm going to list these up here. These are the current prices at the time of recording, so if you are watching this a while later, double check these prices because they might change. But basically the XM5, if you just buy the body itself, it will be $899, and if you buy the XM5 with the kit lens, which is a 15 to 45 millimeter f3.5 to f5.6, that's going to be $999. On the XT30, the body itself is $999, and then if you get it with the kit lens, it's going to be $1149. And that actually comes with this guy, a 13 to 33mm f3.5 to f5.6. Normally, I don't usually recommend getting kit lenses because they don't have the best low light performance, but obviously it does depend on your budget. It is more important that you start shooting rather than trying to save up too much money for like the best possible kit and just not do photography. So I do recommend the kit lens if that's all in your budget. It still is going to be great. And again, with the XT30 Mark III, if you are worried about a little bit of low light performance, the high ISO performance is usually pretty good, and you have the built-in flash. Now onto the main point of this video, which is which one of these cameras should you get? And I think they both kind of separate themselves based on what you're trying to shoot. The XM5 is definitely a little bit more video focused. You are going to have that flip out screen, which is really nice when you're shooting video, and again, vlog style screen if you want to shoot yourself. You have those different mic modes where you can control where the audio is getting picked up from, and you have those few video modes like the vlog mode, product priority, the background defocus. Those are a couple modes that are more for video. It is going to be cheaper and you're going to get a smaller body, so if you don't mind carrying a smaller body, slightly less ergonomic, but it is going to be more compact and easy to carry around. The XM5 might be a good choice for that, and again, this is my recommendation for the go-to camera if you're going to pick up your first camera. One of the best parts about this was that for $899 or $999 if you get the kit lens, you're getting so much packed into this camera. 26 megapixels is way more than most people will need. You're getting pretty decent autofocus. You're getting 6.2K open gate recording, which is something that even my $4,000 Sony cameras can't do. You have Fujifilm X mount, which has a ton of variety of lenses to choose from, and you also have cheaper third-party lenses, which are still pretty good if you want to get some of those. But if you are more focused into doing photography, I think the XT30 Mark III is going to be my new recommendation for a first camera. Yes, it is going to be slightly more expensive, but I think the extra features that the XM5 has isn't really a deal breaker for a lot of people. But the extra features that the XT30 has, like the viewfinder, the pop-up flash, dedicated dials for your exposure, your auto mode, I think these are some things that a lot of people are really going to like that the XM5 doesn't have. Again, it is going to be slightly bigger, a little bit harder to carry around in the bag. You're only getting a tilt up screen instead of a flip out screen if you want to do any vlogging. And again, the price is going to be slightly more expensive, but I personally think that I would recommend this more. Now, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, these cameras are going to be exactly the same quality and performance. So at the end of the day, it does depend on what are you trying to shoot. If your main focus is just video, pick up the XM5. It's going to be a great camera and it's going to have everything that you want. If you are leaning towards photography or even doing both, then I would recommend picking up the XT30 Mark III. And that's pretty much it for this video. But I want to know, let me know down in the comments below, which one of these cameras would you pick up? As always, if you have any questions about these cameras, let me know down in the comments below as well. I always try to respond to every single comment, so if you have any questions, anything that you want me to test out, something that you're wondering about, let me know down there. If you like this video, remember to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to see more photo video content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.